everyone. I'm Karen Gold. I'm curriculum lead at the Narrative-Based Medicine Lab. I'm here with Damian Tarnopolsky, creative lead at the lab. And we are thrilled to talk today with Upreet Dhaliwal about narrative-based medicine. Hi, Upreet.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. I'm Upreet Dhaliwal. I've come all the way from Delhi, India, as you well know. I'm on my way back now and rather sad about it. But I've been, I took part in the narrative medicine the fall season, and I loved every minute of it. So thank you for having me here to talk.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and it's lovely we were able to arrange this while you're in Toronto. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your career in medicine, and what drew you to your specialty?
In India, when you're about 16 or maybe even younger, you make this decision. And the decision is based on peer pressure. It's based on what your mother tells you. So I remember she's a fabulous mother because she brought me to reading and she encouraged all of us to read, and which is why I tell stories. And she said, "Oh, you know what, Upreet, you have lovely surgeon's fingers." I must have been 8 or 10 or something. So I said, "That's brilliant. I mean, how fortunate." And I'm going to go on to becoming a doctor. That's absolutely my motivation. There were no role models. I had no idea what medicine entailed. I did not know what even ophthalmic surgery. I didn't know if I'd be any good. And I remember I loved, it was magical to me, the eye. When I was doing my undergraduate, we call it undergraduate medicine because it's MBBS. And then I had to make the decision, and ophthalmology was top of my list. And most of it was to do with how clean and how beautiful everything was here. No messy. I mean, very rarely do you really get a mess. And that magic continued for about 30 years. I just absolutely loved my discipline. But I can't tell you why I took it because there's really nothing. It was just, I was attracted to the whole idea.
And you mentioned you were a participant in the Narrative-Based Medicine Foundational Certificate with us, and an esteemed and accomplished one, of course. Was that your introduction to narrative-based medicine, or had you worked previously? How did you come to this?
No, so what happened was about 15 years ago, a couple of us, 3 of us in the University College of Medical Sciences, where I taught for all these years, we noticed that there was a lot of disquiet. There was a lot of, for example, patients were unhappy with doctors and doctors were unhappy with patients. I'm not saying it was all pervasive, but perhaps we had time to notice these things. And we were wondering why it's happened and why it's happening and what can we do. And somehow, I think in those days, we chanced upon an article on the humanities. And it all sort of fell together where we noticed that we are divorced from the humanities from the age of 16, because you either take the science stream or you take the humanities or arts, but you can't marry any of those subjects and take them together. So he said, could that be the reason? And then I have 2 sons. One of them went into computer sciences. The other one went into the humanities, into economics. And there's such a world of a difference. And this is a case now, there's just 2 cases I'm basing this on, but it was very close to home. So I said, I wonder why this boy, the one in the humanities, is very calm and he has a sense of his place in the world and he's not agitated or, not everything isn't evidence-based for him. And this other boy is not yet very sure where he wants to go or what is happening in the world around him because he's too much into a field which is very evidence-based. So I wondered all those things. And then we said, let's do this. In India, it wasn't a thing to bring humanities into medical sciences. So we said, let's do this. And each of us was to take an area of interest. So because of storytelling, I said, I'll take narratives and poetry. And then we also have the FAMA. I don't know if you've heard of FAMA Philadelphia, which is the Foundation for International Research in Medical Education and Research. Sorry, and so my colleague said, we should do this. We should do this fellowship because it'll just give you a network and you'll have more people. So I said, I'll take storytelling as my project in that. So I took narratives then, but this was all self-taught and self-learned because I have no background in the humanities. I just introduced the concept to medical students, and I said, let's hear their stories. Let's see what they notice. It was terrifying. They noticed things that were happening in their clinics and in their classes and with their patients, that those stories needed to come out. Some were horrible, even to the point of being ethically and professionally wrong. And some were brilliant role modeling, I should say. So then there was no going back once I'd taken the story. So I've always done narratives with learners and teachers, never with patients. And as a time came when I felt like I needed, all the literature, by the way, is from the US mainly, with a little bit from Canada. So I said, since I come to Toronto off and on, let me see what's happening in Canada. And then I found the lab. And then I said, I needed a network of people who were doing narratives. I wanted to see how they were using it. And so I learned a lot from the NBM lab. Thank you for that.
It sounds like it tapped into something that, even though you didn't have a lot of formal training in, it sounds like it's something that always drew you.
Yes, I think so. Because maybe I needed validation that what I was doing was all right, was also a method, and it was okay. But I always used poems or stories in a medical context. And for the first time, I saw that you could bring anything in, any poem, any story, and people would still draw meaning from it. And they would still be learning. It would still be about human nature, because everything is about human nature.
That's one of the interesting things in this work, that it doesn't have to be a medical,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a medical story for it to be discussing suffering, illness, humanity, all the things that practitioners are experiencing.
Or becoming empathetic, or, learning to express your feelings, or finding words. All those things are important.
I was just really struck by what you said about your learners and your students that you were working with, that the stories, they just needed to come out, that it provided an opportunity for the students to write and reflect and share with each other. And just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you thought was the value to your students around engaging them in that.
Now, this was something that I was actually thinking about yesterday, because I was with Kate and she asked me this question about how do we know we're making a difference. And actually, I don't have any data to say that I am making a difference, but I know that I'm learning. I'm learning about the things. Well, one thing that I learned was when you're with a student, even if it's in a casual environment, in the cafeteria or in a corridor, you are role modeling, because they're looking at you and they're noticing things. And this learning, I thought I was just this teacher, and there was just absolutely only medicine I was teaching them. But then I realized that they notice how you spoke to somebody, how you responded to somebody, so it's one thing for me to be telling them, do it like this, this is how it should be done. And then when I'm not practicing it, that is what they were learning. They were learning that it's all hogwash. You're just, they're just telling you this because they have to, but it's not important. So I think giving them a place where they could talk to you about these things that they'd noticed and where they felt safe. So that space, the space for narrative medicine in medical schools, is so important.
I wanted to ask you about another direction you've taken this work, that you edit a journal called Rhyme, which is for, as I understand it, and from what I've seen, health humanities, but also different ways of learning, different ways of being for practitioners in health. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And also, for the benefit of our learners and participants who might want to try something like that, do you have any advice or tips on creating a journal of this kind?
Well, I say go ahead. The thing is, when we started this work and we wanted to share it with the world, because how else do you change attitudes and behavior if you just, remain in your little silo and that's it? So when I wanted to send my work out to publish humanities work, there was none of the specialty journals. Ophthalmology didn't want to publish it. They said, oh, no. And medicine, none of them wanted to. But Western journals, they did. They had a tiny little space for humanities. At that time, talking about 15 years ago. So about 10 or 11 years ago, we said, let's make our own journal. And this became possible because my institution gave me a 1-year grant. They said, okay, we'll help you for 1 year, but after that you must generate income. And so in that 1 year, I learned what we needed. We used a person who hosted it and did everything, did all the software. But the thing is that in that 1 year, I noticed that nobody wants to sponsor medical humanities in India. They don't want to sponsor your journal. And 2 was that you couldn't tweak, because this person who was hosting our journal was hosting 10 other journals. And for him to tweak the software to fit the kind of articles I was getting was not, he said, no, this can't be done, this can't be done. So very sweet chap, and it was great fun working with him. So I learned. And then I set up my own journal. So we used Open Journal System, which is free. And anyone can, so if you just have a tiny little server space, if somebody gives you that, and you have a person who can do the back-end stuff because zero understanding. But then he puts in OJS for you. And after that, you put in your instructions to authors and submission and everything else. Everything is online, streamlined. OJS does a wonderful job. And the front end isn't gorgeous. And you can't really make it very, very beautiful, but it's certainly possible. So yeah, they should do it. And so because we had nowhere to publish our work, we started this. I was very skeptical. I said, I don't know. Initially, we had to solicit articles. But then they just started coming and the worst thing was during COVID. People were in so much angst, and they were so troubled, and they so wanted to have their feelings out that we had more than 100 submissions, and I burnt out. So then I've actually downscaled but that's all you need, really. And unfortunately, you do need copy editors, and you do need some amount of financial help otherwise. But anyone can do this, really.
It sounds like, it reminds me that during COVID, there was such a need for expression, as you're saying. There was also such an outburst of creativity, artwork, writing by healthcare providers, by people interested in the humanities and healthcare, and it really became an outlet. And it sounds like the journal was sort of a passion project for you. It was a real creative act on your part.
Yeah.
But you're also a poet yourself, a published author. Could you tell us a little bit about what draws you to write poetry and the work that you've done in this field?
So I notice that when I'm disturbed or troubled, I think staccato thoughts, and they're not complete sentences. And so the first poem actually I wrote about my daughter, and I sat on it for a few years because it was I just held it close to me. And then I learned of this online journal, Hectoin International from Chicago. And I just sent it to them, and they published it. So that was fillip to me. And I said, I can do this, but it was very infrequent. I wrote maybe 1 a year. Something had to happen for me to write it. And then I found I had quite a collection, and some were frankly terrible. So it's not like they were some I couldn't even read out, or I just put them away. So this prompted me to look for, I was close to retiring, I took premature retirement because of burnout, if you please. And then I said, how can I get better at the humanities? How can I learn something new? So I applied to the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston for this visiting scholar program. And I offered I offered to write poetry, which would look at ethical and professionalism issues in medical education. I wanted to use them to talk to students about these things. And they said yes. So I went there for 4 months. And that is when I wrote my book. It's thanks to the University of Texas Medical Branch. And then, so I sat there in that lovely office and I wrote poetry. And then I said, but then of course nobody wanted to publish it. I actually wanted to, and this is another thing somebody asked me yesterday, Kate. She said, don't you feel like explaining your poems, a little note or something? And I had initially wanted to give some context. Then my mentor, he told me, why do you want to put ideas into people's heads? Let them read and let them draw their own interpretations. And in the NBM lab, I learned that people can just bring out emotions and ideas that I wouldn't have considered. So to do something in isolation isn't quite the same as I could read a book in isolation and draw my own conclusions. But in a group, like our lovely group in NBM, it was such a lot of learning. So working together on the same story, drawing different interpretations. Even our friend, the vet, she had so much to say about these stories. Really fantastic.
I'm so glad to hear what your mentor said, and I'm glad to hear that you had a similar experience with us, because I was thinking, if the poem comes with an explanation, then there's something wrong with the poem, and the beauty of it, the joy of it, is that liberty and that conversation that you're describing, that the poem creates and inspires and goes in 30 different directions.
It reminds me that that's one of the really rich things about being in community, is that the meanings are so varied. And no matter how many times we might discuss a certain text, a story, a poem, people will see and read into it different things based on what they're bringing to that reading. So I think it's such a rich part of being in community, writing and reading and sharing with each other, as you're saying. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're reading these days? What is
it's going to be a little
drawing you?
It's going to be a little embarrassing, but this is what I'm reading. I finished it.
Highly recommended. That's
I finished it.
You're joining
my favorite.
You're joining a select group, probably the size of this room.
I don't know about that, but I absolutely. So I was thinking about bringing non-medical stories into NBM workshops or classrooms or like that, and the story that I thought my favorite in this.
Sorry, Upreet, I should just interrupt you for a second and explain that Upreet is holding an early publication of mine, a book of short stories there, which I wasn't expecting.
And it's not a product placement.
No, and I'm very confused as to how you got a copy of it. We'll leave that. Anyway,
it's
please.
A secondhand copy
please go
online.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Mile High Club, which goes. So this is about this person. In the beginning, I didn't quite understand what was happening with this person, Clark, and he goes round and round with the same ideas. So when the same idea came again, I said, is it a typo? It was exactly the same, in the same sequence, the same incomplete sentences and all. And I said, oh, why has this come again? And then it goes on like that. And he's going round and round in his head. And in the end, he talks about dying. And it was actually, I thought, I'm sure if people read this story, there would be discussions on perhaps, is it mania? Is it drug-induced? Is it an overdose? Is he really about to die? and so much about him as a person, so much. I don't even know if he had any regret. I don't think he had regret. He'd done some, I'm not going to call them evil things, but he had done something. And there were these characters. He was totally unsupported by family and friends and fiance. That's the impression I got. And I thought how wonderful it is about, in fact, all of the stories about human nature, quirks and mega quirks. And so
it's a great example,
Yeah.
I think, of how you take a text, a story, an essay, a poem, and you can see so much into it, whether that's what the author intended or not. It's like we read, and it's about our relationship to that text, and just the things that you're describing are so rich in terms of it could take the conversation and people's reflections in so many different directions.
But also the construction of the story is so brilliant. It's so powerful.
Oh, it's very kind of you, Upreet. And you'll have to, when I'm in India, being interviewed by you, we'll do a whole discussion of the story.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Thank you very much.
But you also have to autograph it later. So.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so illuminating to hear about your journey to us, and we're so happy to have you as part of our community. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.